You're listening to Estrogen Dropouts.
Hey, welcome back to Estrogen Dropouts. I'm your host, Erin. I am actually solo today because Elizabeth has been feeling under the weather, but I'm really excited for today's episode. Most of our listeners have come to find us because you're in that perimenopause, menopausal stage of life. And so my guest today, Dr. Aleksandra Gajer, is going to address a lot of the questions that many of us have in this time of our life. Dr. Gajer is a board certified physician and a leading expert in metabolic health, hormone balance, and performance medicine. She is the founder of the Gajer Practice, which is a root cause-focused medical clinic helping patients transform their health from the inside out, which as a person that's in pursuing a functional medicine accreditation program, that's like my love language. Her work combines advanced diagnostic, lifestyle medicine, and science-backed innovation to heal metabolism, to restore hormonal harmony and enhance whole body performance. With over 12 years of clinical experience, Dr. Gajer has helped thousands of patients break through stubborn weight gain, fatigue, and hormonal imbalances by targeting the true underlying dysfunction, not just giving somebody medication for symptoms. So her approach blends personalized nutrition, targeted peptide therapy, strategic supplementation, and when appropriate, medications to optimize metabolic and hormonal function at every stage of life. So highly qualified. And Dr. Gajer, welcome to Estrogen Dropouts. I mean, this is my dream guest to have you on as a postmenopausal woman. And like I said, I'm pursuing a functional medicine accreditation program and just looking at, the root cause of so much of what is going on in today's, health crisis. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So walk us through what's actually happening physically, mentally, and emotionally during perimenopause. I mean, I know that word, in the last 10 years, perimenopause, menopause has gotten a lot more press, I would say. But it is a very complex transition. I think forever before I went through perimenopause, I just thought it meant, I'm not going to have a period anymore and I can't have babies anymore. But it's so much more. So enlighten us about all of the ways that this, fascinating transition, and what all it entails.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it really is a fascinating transition. I think it can feel like a curse sometimes, but I think that if we approach it the right way with the right support, it can be a total revolution in a woman's life. And the symptoms that happen in perimenopause can really vary from women to women. But we have this sort of hormonal storm. It's a hormonal transition. For men, their hormones are mostly stable throughout their lives. Testosterone skyrockets during puberty. You get to keep it for as long as you can, and then it, dwindles a little bit. But for us, we have this orchestra of hormones that work together that govern how we feel, how our bodies look, how our metabolism works, how our mood is throughout our days. And that really changes in that perimenopause period. So it really differs for different women when it starts. Women can start experiencing perimenopause symptoms as young as 35. And often we start having symptoms that are related to not having the hormonal support that we've had perhaps throughout our 20s and early 30s. So people often think of perimenopause as hot flashes and night sweats. And that's certainly something that happens to quite a few women, but there are many, many other layers to this. And often perimenopause is more of a roller coaster rather than a quick decline, especially for our estrogen, which estrogen is sort of our juicy hormone. It's our hormone that keeps us feeling youthful, that keeps our joints moist and keeps our mood up and our skin and our hair and all these things. And we can be on a real estrogen roller coaster in perimenopause, where one day it's up, another day it's down. And a lot of women are like, oh my God, what is going on? Is this just me losing my mind? And at the same time, progesterone is usually declining slowly. And progesterone is our calming hormone that helps us sleep, that helps us feel more resilient to stress, that also helps with inflammation. And as we gradually lose the protection of progesterone, we can start, again, many women just don't feel like themselves and feel like, I don't know this body and this mind that it used to be mine, that it used to be predictable. And we don't always think about testosterone, but testosterone is very important for women as well. And testosterone is our drive hormone. And of course, we think about it as sex drive, but it's drive for everything. Drive to go out and see our friends, drive to do our job. It also helps us put on muscle, and often that declines for women quite a bit in this period too. And then there's other hormones that are really important, like insulin and cortisol and thyroid, that will, even growth hormone, that will determine how these changes in our hormones will impact us, how we're going to feel. So, it's a real orchestra, and I think we have way more control how we transition through this part of our lives than maybe our mothers and grandmothers used to. And my goal for women is to really embrace this time period and have it be, it's also a wonderful time period in a woman's life. You've often, women let go of a lot of expectations that were sort of not their own, that were putting a lot of strain on their lives, and it can be a really beautiful and liberating part of life. And my job is to help women feel supported so they can go through this period in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was that NIH study, I think in the late 90s, maybe early, that the Premarin or whatever hormone it was, or HRT, that they were using, and they were like, oh my gosh, it's like it skyrockets breast cancer. And that's been debunked. And I always thought to myself, if having like lots of estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone or adequate levels was going to give you breast cancer, wouldn't it give it to you in your 20s when you had your highest hormone levels? And I know there are some women who get breast cancer in their early 20s, but it's typically 50 and above if you look at the epidemiological studies. And so I love this whole movement where I think so many doctors for a long time just weren't educated on hormones, and they just weren't given so because they didn't have that knowledge, they weren't prescribing hormones. And there's this whole generation of women who suffered with the hormone loss. And I had breast cancer diagnosed at 44, and I cannot get a doctor to prescribe estrogen or progesterone to me. They will I'm on some testosterone, but I'm like, I will take the risk. I would sign off. I will give you you're giving me this with not my knowledge that, hey, they don't feel comfortable doing it. But it's even though there's so much more of a shift to embracing hormone replacement, there's still that whole segment of women who have had, and I had DCIS, stage 0. I didn't do the radiation. I didn't follow any of the doctor's recommendations. I had a lumpectomy. I was like, that's it. I didn't do tamoxifen. I was my own advocate, and it's been 11 years. And, but so what do you, for you is with your doctor hat on? I know it's probably as a doctor, you have one way that you have to think, but then maybe as a woman, do you find that you feel differently about hormones for women that have had a breast cancer history?
Yeah, I think that, again, this has to be shared decision making. And I love what you just said, and I think that medicine for a very long time has been highly paternalistic, where even the model of medicine that I trained in was highly paternalistic, and where we're kind of making decisions with the patient. I think that giving patients the information that they deserve to know to help make a decision together is the right way to go about this. And you brought up the Women's Health Initiative, and I think that did a huge disservice to a lot of women, and you're exactly right. So what they used was a synthetic hormone called Premarin, which is pregnant mare's urine, pregnant horse's urine, which is chemically quite different from the estrogen that we make in our bodies. And that study saw some pretty concerning findings in terms of breast cancer, heart disease risk, and most of it has been redacted. And we know now that if we start early, especially with heart disease, with brain health, with bone health, that giving women estrogen back in particular is highly protective. Breast cancer is tricky, and I do treat some women who have had breast cancer, and we have a conversation. I have a handful of them in my practice, especially if they're 10 plus years out. We have a conversation, and I think breast cancer is still one of those things that we don't have enough data to say 100% what it does to your risk. But there are some studies that show that estrogen actually decreases your risk of cancer or cancer recurrence. If you have an estrogen sensitive cancer, you shouldn't take estrogen. Those cancers feed on estrogen, and that's one clear case where if your tumor has estrogen receptors, then we should not be giving women that. But in every other case, I think it's worth looking at. I think we can give women an idea of what their actual risk is from the studies that are available. And all the recent research has shown that estrogen is incredibly protective, especially when it comes to brain health, bone health, heart health, and especially when it's started early. So I really believe in making this decision with women. It's your body. The way I think about it often is, as humans, we've been on Earth for about 300,000 years. And for 99% of that time, 299,000 years, we lived till about 40. We lived to and then, so our bodies adapted to make hormones to keep us healthy for that time period. The body's very careful about conserving energy. And so, but now we're alive for an extra 30 years, and there's no other disorder or condition where if a hormone or a substance is not made in the body, we don't replenish it. So if you don't have enough thyroid, we give you back thyroid. If men don't have enough testosterone, they get testosterone. If you're a type 1 diabetic and you're not making insulin, you get insulin. And we've had to fight this fight for women who are no longer making estrogen, progesterone, testosterone to actually get their hormones back. And it can really impact quality of life, longevity, health, all these things.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because medicine has been geared for men. I mean, all the studies are done on men. I had read, and maybe you can verify, that if you equalize the way estrogen and estrogen and testosterone are measured in the body, because they're measured differently, that women have more testosterone than estrogen. But, like science or the medical community, still, like I have to pay for testosterone out of pocket, whereas my husband takes exogenous testosterone and it's paid by insurance.
Right.
So
Yes.
it is like we're still, we have the pink tax. We're still just the ones that are still getting the short end of the stick, which I'm not a man hater. I have 3 grown sons. I love men, but our society has just been so male dominated and focused. And I do think that I see a change. There's been a shift, I would imagine. It's going to keep on changing. So, hopefully for like my future granddaughters, they will get much better care than, than my mom did and myself and my, my sisters. But so for women, oftentimes I know I wouldn't call it a midlife crisis, which is why I started the podcast. For the longtime listeners, they know I was just like, my youngest was leaving for college. I was like, what the hell? Who am I? I don't know what I'm doing. Who am I anymore? And I told my husband, like, I'm done taking care of people. And he was like, what? And so I know that you have talked about how it is this kind of identity crisis, and that, we're kind of all like, just all of a sudden, who are we? What am I? So talk to me about, how you have had the quote, changing your mind before you change your body. And how does this inner alignment work during menopause, and what does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think a lot of women sort of experience this in silence or in isolation. And, I think naturally a lot of women are caregivers and we enjoy taking care of people, but a lot of women have the experience of feeling overextended and maybe have spent most of their lives being a caregiver of one sort or another, or bending to the requests and needs of other people. And I think that this is a time period where identity really does come into question, where we let go of some of what other people think we should be, or what our role on earth is. And I've seen a lot of women really step into their own needs during this time. I think really, and not to say that we neglect our duties, but maybe it's just a little bit more balanced, where I have just witnessed a lot of women finding their voice. And I think it starts sometimes with hormonal support and getting balanced and saying, these are the things I need. And I love giving back and I love caring for others, but I do it so much better when I'm nourished, when I feel like myself, when I spend my time doing things that light me up. And I think there's often this opportunity to really look at, what brings us joy, because life is hard. hard, it's hard to raise children. It is hard to build a career. It's hard to take care of a home. And we have all these objectives in the prior decades of our lives. And sometimes it just sort of lines up with that hormonal transition where women feel like, what is next? And I think it's a real opportunity to step into the best versions of ourselves, the most authentic and truthful versions of ourselves, where we can be more effective in our roles, but also be there for the people around us and for ourselves at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think of, you're probably too young, but there was a commercial when I was growing up in the 70s, and it was Anjali perfume, and
Mm-hmm.
she was in a ball gown or like evening gown, and she's like, I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never, never, never let you forget you're a man. That's the kind of stuff that we were fed.
Yes.
Like, okay, not only do I have to take care of everyone, women fought to like get back into the workforce. We had to fight to be able to get credit cards. So, but then we also, not only do we have to do all of that and take care of our man, but we also have to look damn good while we do it,
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
You got to be dressed in a ball gown with high heels on.
Yes.
And the other thing that I think that talking about kind of like that identity shift with, perimenopause, menopause, is that I think, and I don't know if this is true, but I say that estrogen is kind of like your give a shit hormone. And I know that's not probably the technical medical term, but I think that's why so many women they say like we have a midlife crisis. It's different than a man's midlife crisis, where we're just like, I'm done. It's like we've got a bucket and it's just been filling up. We're been pouring from it. And all of a sudden that bucket's empty. And we're just like, huh? Wait, something's got to give. And then because we've been fed all those subliminal messages and not so subliminal messages through television, through ads, not only do I have to be a rock star in the corporate world or my career, at home, my kids, my house has to be perfect, and I have to be a rock star, like beautiful, always looking like $1,000,000. So I guess giving back women some of those hormones then helps them to kind of probably equalize so that they don't burn the house down.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just an opportunity to sort of start thinking about ourselves a little bit in a new way and making sure that we have the support we need as well, and we can go out and do the things we want to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so beyond hormones, though, I know that you use peptides with menopausal patients. So first off, for listeners that have no idea what peptides are, could you give us a little bit of a background of what peptides are? Which ones you think are the most game-changing for women in this time period? Like for me, postmenopausal, I've thought about peptides often, and then how they actually differ from hormones. Like,
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So peptides are really interesting, and I think they are sort of the frontier of where we are now in medicine and performance medicine and health optimization. So peptides are chemical messengers that we have in our bodies. So they tend to be small chains of amino acids. Protein that we eat is amino acids. It's made of amino acids. So unlike medications often have to be something foreign to the body and it has to be broken down by the liver or the kidneys, peptides sort of just break down to their amino acids. They do their job and they leave. And we don't often talk about the fact that we have a lot of peptides in our bodies that are sending signals all over the place. The difference between hormones is that hormones signal between what are called endocrine glands, which is just a little bit different, where peptides can signal between different parts of the body. But peptides are responsible for a lot of different signaling when it's related to energy, to sleep, to our weight management. And peptides really came into the spotlight because of Ozempic. And we've all heard about Ozempic, and that is the peptide semaglutide. And it is something that increases something called GLP-1 that's made in our stomachs that help us feel full faster and regulates the metabolism a little bit. So that is just one type of peptide, but there are other peptides that can help optimize the body. There are some peptides that are called bioregulators, which can improve mitochondrial health, which is something that the mitochondria is the energy centers in our cells that determine what will happen to food after we put it in our body. Will it be stored as fat or can we use it as fuel? And especially after periods of high stress or during a hormonal transition, we can see that the mitochondria is just not working as well as it used to. There are many reasons why women gain weight during perimenopause, but especially stress and chemical exposures from our environment can put a tax on our mitochondrial health. And I can talk about specific peptides and how they help women in perimenopause and menopause, but when I work with women, most of the time we focus on a few foundations first. So first, I want to make sure that your metabolic health is tuned up, which means that you can use food as fuel. And that's kind of a loaded term, and people often think about it as weight, but it's far more than weight. I think weight is important, and the amount of fat tissue we're carrying around could be important for our health, but it's much more important that we have a lot of healthy muscle, because lean muscle is really the currency of health. Lean muscle signals to other part of the body. It sends chemical messengers out called myokines that are anti-inflammatory, that support our mood, that do a lot of really positive things. So I think building muscle and getting a foundation of metabolic health is really important. Then we work on hormones and make sure that hormones are as balanced as they can be. But sometimes there are remaining symptoms, whether it's related to energy or anxiety or skin health or sleep. And there are peptides that can target all these different things. And they're usually used for short periods of time, sometimes a month, sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes 3 or 4 months. It depends, but usually doing a cycle of a peptide can basically do a little bit of a cellular upgrade in certain parts of our bodies. And I think this is particularly useful for women who have a lot of metabolic dysfunction, or women who have autoimmunity, or women who have just been under a lot of stress. And that causes some effects on the body that sometimes, even if our hormones are as supported as they can be pretty tough to overcome.
Yeah, my youngest son used peptides recently. He had an inguinal hernia repair, and he had done a lot of research on his own. He's a nuclear engineering major, so he's a researcher, and he used the BPC,
Yeah.
and it really helped. Is there anyone or who is a good candidate for peptides? And then is there anyone who is not a candidate for peptides?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And I know there's so many different kinds, right?
Exactly. There's so many different kinds. I think it's really, peptides are new on the stage of regenerative medicine right now, and they're highly unregulated. So I would be very careful where you purchase peptides. First of all, there's 3 things that peptides need to be tested for. One is sterility, making sure that there's no bacteria in them. Another one is endotoxicity. In the process of making peptides, it's very common for something called an endotoxin to get in there. If it's not tested for that, there can be some toxins that stay in your body forever and cause a lot of inflammation. So I don't recommend just buying your peptides off the internet and hoping for the best. Working with a doctor who understands your medical history and can source peptides from a source that is testing for all these things is really important. And the last is purity. You want to make sure that it's at least 99% pure, and that what's in the bottle is what's supposed to be in the bottle. So we test for all those 3 things before we use any of our peptides. And then again, I'm very careful to understand a patient's medical history before using peptides. But the people who should not use peptides, we have to be extra careful for people who have active cancer or a history of cancer. There are peptides that actually can promote healing from cancer and prevent cancer, but there are some that increase growth hormone levels. And for people who have cancer, of course, we don't want to grow a tumor any further. BPC-1 that you mentioned is an amazing peptide. It stands for body protective compound. It's something that's made in our stomachs naturally.
Gastric juices.
Yeah, gastric juices, exactly. And it prevents the acid in our stomach from eating up the stomach lining. And it can also travel to joints, tendons, and decrease inflammation and help with healing. But it promotes something called angiogenesis, which is the making of new blood vessels. So again, if you have cancer, you're somebody with a strong family history of cancer, you haven't had your mammograms, I want to make sure that you're healthy before we do something like that. So I think cancer history is a big one. And And then it depends. I look at everybody's other medications and health history to determine if there could be any interactions or if somebody have some kind of condition that makes them a poor candidate for peptides. Mostly they are very safe and most people do very well. I think we just have to choose carefully to make sure it blends with the rest of their health.
Okay. I was going to do this at the end, but I want to ask you
Mhm.
now. So you can work with people virtually.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That was because I was like, oh man, I'm like, I need to get with you. But I'm in Northern Virginia, so I can't come to your clinic. What would you say are 3 things that every woman could do today to support herself through perimenopause and before even getting to like hormone or peptide, replacement or addition? And so what would be like the 3 foundational things that women would need to do?
Yeah, I would say start by maybe refocusing on how you're nourishing your body. And when we think about food, again, people often think about weight. And I want to encourage women to be on a nutrient hunt. What I want you to do is to be looking for foods that will nourish your body, that will support your gut microbiome. That means lots of fiber, different colored vegetables, eating enough protein, and really focusing on building lean muscle, because lean muscle can really impact how you're going to go through hormonal transitions. And there was a recent study that looked at all these risk factors, all the factors that predicted whether somebody would survive a cancer diagnosis. And the number one factor that determined whether someone would survive cancer is how much lean muscle they had going in. So there's just so much protection there. I would just encourage women to focus on their muscle, focus on nutrition and exercise, and not just focus on the weight. Second, I would encourage women to take care of their sleep hygiene and try to protect sleep to the best of our abilities. So this is not sometimes easier said than done, but trying to work on that sleep hygiene and making sure that you're sleeping in a dark room, that you have enough time to sleep, they have a cool room to sleep, that there aren't as many disruptions, and that you're not drinking coffee in the afternoon, because sleep is so vital for our hormones and for our overall health in order to stay well long term. And then the last thing I think is stress and how that impacts our bodies. Stress is inevitable. There's going to be stress in life, and some stress is good. There's certainly good stress, and we can't always get rid of stress in our lives. We can't make it go away entirely, but we can do a lot to manage how it impacts our bodies. And I think taking ownership of some of that and making sure that we have some de-stressing rituals, ways to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the calm, restore part of our nervous system that brings the vagus nerve online and really changes our biochemistry in big ways.
Well, I love that because a few episodes ago we did 4 foundations of health, and it was sleep, number 1, movement, nutrition, focusing on nutrient dense foods, and then stress management. So it's the exact same thing that we did. It's like, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be adding in all these things. It can just be as simple as, like, if you focus on these 4 things, and I got an aura ring last year for my birthday, and it has made me prioritize sleep. It made me realize how I have a tendency to miss the sleep bus. It would come around, but then I'd get a little second wind because I'd stay up, and how bad my sleep was. And so now I'm always on the hunt to try to get a perfect score. So I made sleep this past year has been my priority. I'm real good. I exercise daily. I eat a very healthy diet. I manage my stress, but sleep was my Achilles heel. And so I was like, I've got to prioritize it. So I love that you basically echoed exactly what we said in our episode. So that makes me feel that, we were on the right path.
Yes.
So is there anything else that you would want to add?
Yeah, I think it's often an overwhelming period of life, and I think it can feel out of control. And I just want to empower women to know that there is a lot that's in your control, and you don't have to make some crazy sweeping changes and become a different person and give up everything you like. You can still have your chocolate and occasional wine, and there are ways of optimizing your body and taking care of your health without something drastic, because sometimes change can be really scary, and there are so many practitioners listeners now that are talking more about menopause, perimenopause, these physical transitions supporting women's bodies. And I would just encourage women to, take time for yourself, focus on yourself, look at what's out there. How can you support yourself better? Because you can be better for every part of your life if you're happier and healthier and you're really investing in the future decades of your life. What you're doing now will determine how you feel in the next decade of your life. If you're in your 40s like me, my actions now will determine how I feel when I'm 55, and what I do later will determine how I'm doing at 65 and 75 and 85. And I still want to be, active and doing the things I love. So I just encourage women to invest in themselves and find someone to partner with that can understand your health and your needs.
Yeah, I read something that said that one of the keys to how women handle perimenopause, menopause is their attitude. And so for me, I just tried to embrace it as another transition of my life. It was like I was the maiden and then I was the mother and now I'm the crone. And it's just like each phase of life, each season has its challenges, but it also has the beauty. And so I tried to really focus on trying to look at it from more of, embracing it and just like trying to find the good in it. Like all my kids are gone. I'm an empty nester. I have a lot more free time. I can pursue a lot of my little, hobbies and what have you, and have a lot more time for myself. So I think, that mental shift, like we were talking about earlier, about like it's like in the mind first before you even can make any changes physically. Well, tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yes. So you can find us online at thegajerpractice.com. That's Gajer. And the easiest way to find out how you can work with us is to book a free intro call, and we'll tell you all your options, any costs associated with working with us, and let you know how we can help you get back on the right track. And we are on Instagram at The Gajer Practice as well.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to put it in the show notes, and I'm already going to be heading to your website to book
I love it. I cannot wait.
I'm like,
That's amazing.
I love that you work with people all over the world.
Yes.
Because we have listeners all over the world. So it doesn't have to be just in your area. That's one of the best things with our technology today is that it's made us so much more connected. We can basically bring things to our door instead of having to like constantly go searching. So
yes, that's awesome.
Well, I think our listeners are going to get a lot of great information. I know certainly I did as well. And so if you have not hit the follow button for the podcast, make sure you do that so that you can stay in the loop whenever we release a new episode each week. And then, of course, we are on all of the social medias, IG, TikTok, and YouTube for the full video, estrogen dropouts for that as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Gajer. And I know that I will be seeing you soon too.
Yay. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
This has been a production of Estrogen Dropouts, LLC.